Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on our great panel. And welcome to the sixth webinar series. My name is Ashiagbor. I'm your host, and in a few minutes, I'll be handing you over to our moderator for today's panel. For those who don't know, this session has been organized by AfricaNEV, and we are continental non-profits, as well as a community advocating for the adoption of e-mobility solutions on the continent. And you can see our 5 moderators all over the continent with diverse and different backgrounds. This is the second in our webinar series. There will be more such sessions happening, and including some that are not on this list that we are looking at. So our next session will be on the 30th of March 2023. The session, this is the outline for the session. I'm actually spending some of the moderators' time. Our first panelist is Mr. Lazrak Ibrahim, who is the founder and CEO of Multi-Trade with a brand called E-Moto. They are a trading and general distribution company based in Morocco, and they have currently ventured into e-mobility in the same country. Followed by Christopher Maara, who is the founder and CEO also of Kiri EV in Kenya. They're into electric 2- and 3-wheelers. And of course, we have our very Thomas Courtright, the Director of Research for AEMDA, who are an industry advocacy group for the electric mobility space on the continent. And Olukokun Tolulope, who is the founder and CEO of ThinkBikes Automobile. Currently, he's not on the panel, but he will join us soon. He is in transit. He also doubles as a moderator of AfricaNEV, as you saw from an earlier slide. And now hand over to our moderator for the day, Dr. Joseph. We are in your good hands. Please take it on.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Remeredzai Kuhudzai. I'm with Electric Africa. Just a short intro. We're a platform to advocate for the adoption of electric vehicles and raise awareness on electric vehicles on the continent. I'd like to thank the AfricaNEV for organizing this webinar series of the 6th Summit, and we look forward to having the physical full summit later on as the year progresses. Today, our focus is on the market for 2- and 3-wheelers in Africa, a very important topic. And I'm glad to see on the panelists, we have panelists from North Africa, we have West Africa, and we also have East Africa. Which is fairly representative, actually properly representative, because if you look at the dynamics of Africa, you don't really see much activity in the 2-wheeler and 3-wheeler market in Southern Africa. It's more prominent in East, West, and North Africa. I think as we start, let's just get some opening remarks from each of the panelists to tell us a bit of more background on their work they're doing and how the market is currently and how it has developed up until now and where they see it going. Let's start with North Africa. Hello, Ibrahim. Welcome to the series.
Thank you, Joseph, for the invitation. Thank you, Gad. I'm very happy to share with you our experience in the electric mobility for 2-wheelers in Morocco. And I'm very happy to see that things are happening here in Africa, and that there are people that want to encourage this mobility, because I believe personally that this mobility is the future of the 2- and 3-wheelers mobility in Africa and in the world. So I am the CEO of Multitrade, which is an import and distribution company here in Morocco. And among my tasks were the development of this company. And I have chosen to go on the electric mobility on the 2-wheelers here in Morocco, as I am the pioneer in this industry. And now we are 5 actors in this market. But 5 years ago, there were no electric scooter or motorcycles in Morocco. Just to give you an idea, 90% of the fleet of the two-wheelers fleet in Morocco are 50 cc, equivalent 50 cc on the ICE motorcycles. Okay, so it means here in Morocco that there is no driving license needed for these motorcycles, and we have on the existing fleet about 2 million in Morocco, and every year we have about 200,000 motorcycles that are sold every year. So there is an opportunity for the electric motorcycles here in Morocco, and this is why I invested this sector. So we set up E-Moto. E-Moto is the brand that distributes our motorcycles. And as you know, China is producing like 95% of the electric motorcycles in the world, maybe 99%, as they are very, very advanced in this sector. So I choose to import electric motorcycles equivalent 50 cc from China. So I went to China and visited a lot of manufacturers, and then I had some exclusivity with some manufacturers that had the products that can fit with the Moroccan market and the Moroccan need in terms of motorcycles. So 5 years ago, we started to import this motorcycle, and we were creating the market, as there were no electric motorcycles before. And the challenge was to convince the final customers to swap from the ICE motorcycles to electric motorcycles. And the electric motorcycles are still perceived as an innovative product. So the challenge was to educate the person, to communicate on the advantage of the electric motorcycles. And it's quite difficult, but this is a challenge, and we're convinced that we'll go through this challenge. And for now, after 5 years, there are like 2,000 electric motorcycles that are circulating in Morocco, and E-Moto has sold between 300 and 400 electric motorcycles. And we hope that this trend will be booming in the next years. But unfortunately, in Morocco, we don't have any subsidies from the government as we can find it in Europe. But we hope that there will be maybe some helps in the next years that will help this market to boom in the next years. But well, we are doing without it, and we are really communicating on the advantage of the electric motorcycles in terms of consumption, in terms of maintenance, and the saving that the electric motorcycle can allow versus the ICE motorcycles. So this is the experience of E-Moto in terms of two-wheelers electric mobility. We have now 3 showrooms by our own in Casablanca, which is the main city in Morocco. And we develop a network of distributors across the country in the biggest cities in Morocco. In order to have more and more customers. And we try to work only with the distributors that have the experience of ICE motorcycle, so that they can touch the customers of ICE motorcycles, because the challenge is to convert these ICE motorcycles users to electric motorcycles users at the end of the day. So we developed our network, we are communicating, and we had some advertising campaign, especially on the digital, on the social networks, okay? And we try also to set up some driving tests among the corporate companies and sometimes with the particular customers, for example, in commercial centers, and in order to present the product and to communicate on their advantages. So we try to communicate on this project more and more, and we hope that that we will be selling more and more electric motorcycles in the next month and in the next years. So this is roughly the experience of E-Moto in the electric mobility sector here in Morocco.
Yeah, thank you very much for that update. So as you heard from Ibrahim, there are currently 2 million ICE two-wheelers in Morocco, and they bring in every year 200,000 two-wheelers. So if we try and be a bit of fairly conservatively optimistic, if 25% of those become electric every year, you're looking at 50,000 two-wheelers electric per year.
Yeah,
that's actually quite a big addressable market. So thank you for that update. We'll come back to you again for North Africa, but let's move to West Africa. I'd seen Olukokun here. Olukokun, can you hear us? Are you settled now?
Yeah, hi.
So we just had an update from North Africa, from Morocco. Please, can you give us an update on where the market is right now in West Africa, in Nigeria and the region, for two-wheelers and three-wheelers, and then also how far along it has come from the beginning to now, and where do you think it's going in the near future?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity once again, and hello to everyone. And a very good story from Morocco. Yeah, I see we first of all are battling a culture of what people think it's a sign of poverty when it comes to two-wheelers, three-wheelers in Nigeria and some part of West Africa. Motorcycles are common, you know. It's a very very common means of transportation for people that doesn't have or could not afford vehicles. But left to people, everybody wants vehicles because it shows you are luxurious. It shows some level of affluence, and that's the attachment towards that. Now, coming from the space we are operating from, which is bicycle. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
And okay, and the kind of culture we have to battle with, like bicycles are meant for the poor, you know. Even though we are making it electric and all of that, the culture is still right there to battle with. So over time, it's changing. People are accepting it, especially because of certain problems, the hike in fuel prices, the unavailability, and trying to make profit out of this. And some companies are being forced to be sustainable, so that makes them look attractive for other gains like grants and all of that. So generally speaking, in Nigeria is becoming well acceptable right now. And compared to other West Africa like Senegal, I was in Senegal and they were like, wow, they want this solution. This will be really nice for the farm and all of that, you know. So with my experience with ThinkBikes, yes, I think the future of mobility will be on 2 and 3 wheelers, right? It will help with the, you know, the normal affordability and other benefits that come with it. And we are the pioneer in Nigeria. We are the first to be doing this. We've only had probably a competition sort of in Ghana, Maara Mobility, that is doing 2-wheel. I want to go into 4-wheel for micro mobility as well, you know. So it's really pleasant. The future of the market is there, and we see that Africa has a very large market. Though there are complexities, like we don't have all the components we need on the continent. We still have to look into China to bring in some of these things. But then if we're able to get it right, I believe it will help the economy, and Africa will be very big on e-mobility, especially 2 and 3 wheelers. That would be my my take on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So let's move to East Africa, and we have Chris from Kiri EV. Chris, welcome to the series, and just give us an overview of how it's looking in East Africa and Kenya, and also how far it's come along and where you think it will be in the immediate future.
Thanks for the invite. Pleasure to be on here. So East Africa, I think East Africa has been on the continent the focal point of e-mobility. I think Nairobi has more e-mobility companies than the whole of East Africa and probably the whole of Africa combined. But funny thing about that, all the e-mobility companies in East Africa have less bikes. In Kenya, have less bikes on the road than one startup in Uganda put together. So I think there's something wrong with the Kenyan ecosystem in that I think either it's too pricey or government regulations haven't aligned properly to allow the industry to really take off. But to be honest, I think what has really been happening is that the companies have been, companies in this sector have really been doing a lot of R&D and really trying to understand what the customer wants, what business model will actually work, what's the right vehicle type, what's the right battery type, what's the right, is it battery swapping, is it charging? And I think now you're starting to see a bit more market segregation in terms of companies specializing. I think a lot of the companies in Kenya are also very ambitious in wanting to design their own motorcycle. Companies like Rome that have gone for completely design, the companies like EcoBorder. So there's that differentiation in the market. But within East Africa, we also see places like Rwanda, which has been very progressive and very supportive of the market. Typically, I think Rwanda is a smaller market. Typically, it's about 5,000 new units sold a month. And obviously, it's doing a great job in really putting electric mobility on the forefront in terms of awareness of the customers in the face of government, so that government can actually support the sector. In Uganda, the president recently announced that they're planning on supporting the industry and giving everyone an electric motorcycle. We don't know whether that's just campaign talk or whether that is going to materialize, but if that does, it's going to be a real boost to the sector. But you can also see, there's also been the local champion, Kiri Motors, which has really boosted at least on the 4-wheeler side, and it's a locally assembled bus. Coming back to the rest of East Africa, there's been a bit of activity in Ethiopia. We're seeing a lot more demand and a lot of people starting to ask why about electric bikes from Ethiopia. We're seeing Tanzania is coming up as well. Not so much, we haven't heard much from Burundi, but those are the key areas where we see electric mobility taking off. Coming back to Kenya, Kenya, I think, is also the same size market. It's very similar to Morocco in terms of we have about between 200 and 250,000 new units sold per year. Government is looking to electrify about 5% of this by 2030, which, if that materializes, will translate to quite a number of units per month, which I don't think even all the number of local players will be able to satisfy. So the future for at least e-mobility, at least I'd say in Kenya and East Africa, is quite bright. I think that education is starting, consumer awareness is starting to grow beyond the initial bubble of the first early adopters. It's starting to spread into the mass market. Now I think what's really needed is what's been holding back the sector, at least from our point of view, and the experience we had, is where's the charging infrastructure? Where is the financing? And we're starting to see a lot more players coming in and starting to finance it, like M-Copper is coming to the market, Watu is coming to the market. So that the questions that the customers asking for is really starting to be answered. Now it's up to the companies in the sector to now deliver a product and deliver a product.
Thanks, Chris, for that overview. Next, I'd like to introduce Tom Courtright. I think Tom Courtright is taking, he works all across Africa. He's maybe taking a continental view, wearing two hats. He's with AEMDA, but he also does a lot of research work on the mobility space in Africa in general. So Tom, can you give us maybe a global overview of where we are now in the African 2- and 3-wheeler market, where we've come from and where we think we will be in the near future?
If it's all right, I'll just share a couple of really quick slides that I think are interesting. So just starting quickly, you know, why are we even talking about 2- and 3-wheelers? Well, sorry, before I get into that, thank you very much, Remy, for hosting, Gad, AfricaNEV. You know, it's great to have these kind of forums. But yeah, so in terms of thinking about moto taxis across Africa, why does this matter, right? And it matters because A, there's huge numbers across the continent, right? Not including North Africa, right? It's an estimate of around 22 million. They provide a lot of service. So these are not only personal scooters, which they often are in West Africa, but they're also motorcycle taxis who are providing 12, 15, 20 trips a day, right? So they're moving a lot of people. They're providing very valuable service in informal settlements, in rural areas, and in traffic jams. But they're not really well regulated in most countries, right? Rwanda is an exception, but even there's a limit, right? So earlier last year, they tried to implement requiring this app, you know, a usage of a fare calculator, and even they weren't successful there. So they're a very difficult to regulate segment, but they're massive and they provide a huge service. And then just looking at it across the continent really quickly, you know, there's huge numbers in East Africa, right? I mean, boda bodas started literally on the border between Uganda and Kenya. That's where it comes from. In Nigeria, they're Okadas, because there was an airways in the 80s called Okada Airways, right? And the joke was they can fly like Okada. And so those terms spread across the region. But in Francophone West Africa, you have a lot of personal scooters, which is a very different segment because they do fewer kilometers per day. They don't have the same rigorous needs. And so just one more kind of quick, interesting factoid here is thinking about how they earn money, right? So if we're thinking about electrifying them, we need to understand what are they spending their money on currently? And that's pretty consistent across the continent. What differs is their revenues, their daily revenues, and that largely depends on the local economy, but also a couple of interesting nuances. So for example, in Accra, they're able to earn more money largely because, sorry, if somebody could mute, I'm hearing feedback. Thank you. So they're able to earn larger incomes, not only because of local economy, but also because they're illegal. And so they're able to charge higher premium for that service. But generally speaking, you're looking at expenditures of around $40 a week, right? So people are spending something between $3 to $5 on their motorcycle every day, either as rent or as a lease. They're spending something similar on fuel. And then they're also spending on maintenance, which varies hugely. And so the opportunity here is basically to save significant amounts of money for these riders by eliminating oil, by having the cost of the maintenance, and then by reducing the cost of the fuel, right? And so there's a lot of detail we could get into here, but the basics of it are that if you're going to do a charging system, then you have to think, okay, great. They can save a lot of money because they're going to pay a local electricity rate. It'll be something like 20% of what they're paying for fuel, but the cost of that battery will be very expensive. They have to have electricity at home. You have to have a good grid, right? You have to think, okay, how will this battery be maintained? Will this battery serve their daily needs, right? Drivers typically, especially commercial drivers, are moving 100, 120 kilometers a day. That's average. There's many that do more than that. So you have to keep all of that in mind, right? And so that's why so many folks like Ampersand, I think I saw Josh was on this call, E-Moto, Zembo, Botawork are rolling out, and Chris, and many folks are rolling out battery swap systems. And the idea here is, okay, this is much more convenient for drivers, right? A driver can roll up, pull the battery out, put in a new one. And that's a really interesting and innovative business model. And it fits into how they already operate. So without taking up too much time, it's a really nuanced and fascinating segment that serves a huge population. There's a huge opportunity here to reduce Forex losses, right? Importing fuel. There's a great opportunity to improve local incomes, but also incomes for electricity companies who are often struggling. So yeah, it's a large, complicated segment, but it's a fascinating one. I'm personally mostly driven by my own research interests in it. So yeah, great to be here. And Remy, take it back to you.
Thank you, everybody, for that. So we have a global overview of the African continent. So I just want to put some questions to the panelists. And as where we are now, you heard Chris mention, there's a lot of R&D happening across the continent. So my question is open to the floor to everybody on the panel, and later on, anyone else wants to answer. Where are we now in the 2- and 3-wheeler market? Are we, in terms of are we still mostly on R&D phase? Are we still developing solutions locally? Or do we now have a locally developed, commercially available 2- and 3-wheeler? Or are we now working with importing en masse from a mass producer in Asia or wherever? So where are we now in Africa?
I think especially on the East African side, a lot of companies are now, I think, emerging out of that R&D phase. They've done a bit of piloting, limited commercial piloting. They have maybe 1 or 2 versions of their bikes on the road, and maybe on their version 3 or maybe version 4. And I think we're now looking at more or less the final version that's going to go into commercial production. And I think why it's taken a little bit longer is that a lot of people brought off-the-shelf bikes. And then from there, they had to figure out, okay, is this bike going to work? Most people quickly realized, okay, it didn't quite work because these bikes were basically made for personal commuting in China or in the Far East. And then they're brought here, and then you're using them for very heavy commercial purposes. So it was that re-engineering them to fit the local use. And then also figuring out from there is, okay, we've gotten a bike that works. How much of it can we internalize? How much of it can we produce? Some countries, especially in East Africa, there's local content that has to be met for you to become an assembler. In some other regions, you don't really have to do that. So you can go back to your manufacturer in China and tell them that these are the improvements we're doing. The other issue has also been, as you now have a product, are you going to go down the battery swapping or the battery charging, or are you going to provide the financing? So a lot of that had to be, I think a lot of companies are now have had to figure those out. What's the right battery? What's the chemistry? What's the charging? We're going to set up the swap stations. What type of swap stations are we going to have? If you look at across all the players, there's people who have containerized swap stations where you actually have someone who does the swapping for you, versus others who have automated swap stations where you just come and you do the swap yourself and you go. And this had a lot of challenges in terms of you have to figure out what's the right battery weight, what's the right chemistry. But I think now these questions have been answered. A lot of the companies have also raised enough money to actually now put units on the ground. So I think this year, especially in East Africa, you're going to see more units on the road. And that now will start seeing the market really develop in gaining traction.
Yeah.
So we're moving out of that R&D.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think you can raise your hand. So maybe let me put this also to Tom. What are you seeing in this regard?
Yeah, really good question. So, I mean, folks have been working on these bikes and adapting them to the local market for a couple of years now. We've got fleets, fleets of 30, fleets of 100, 200, 500. I think one of the things that makes it so difficult to scale is that all of the first movers, you're building a whole ecosystem because you're designing, you're importing, you're retailing, in many cases you're financing, you're swapping, you're maintaining, and that's a lot to build all at once. And that has slowed folks down considerably. The good news is that, you know, people are building, they are getting traction, right? I mean, I get interesting messages all the time from folks asking, "Oh, what's happening in the sector?" And so there's a lot of interest that's really piling up, and you know, ticket sizes are improving and all of that. If I may just kind of point out the elephant in the room here, though, which is that there are already extremely large Indian OEMs and some Chinese who are providing huge numbers of ICE vehicles to the continent. And so the question is kind of, what will happen when they show up? When will they show up? And then how will they show up? Will people be in a position to partner with them? Will people be able to outright compete with them? You know, those are the interesting questions. But the work that folks are doing right now is really difficult, thankless work. But I think that you can see it not only in the investor interest, but also in the simple level of demand from moto taxis, right? I mean, there's huge waiting lists for people. People are doing very little advertising, and yet they have huge waiting lists. I think there's a need, obviously, when you know, are starting in a place or moving in a new country, you know, you do need to make sure you're adapting to the local market, right? There's certain styles of vehicle or certain powers of engine motor that work better in certain places than others, and that always needs to be kept in mind. But otherwise, you know, I think that we're in this transition phase of going from R&D to scaling. And it's an issue basically now of getting those two pieces together, right? Of getting the financing together, and then hopefully getting some partnerships together so that companies don't have to do the entire ecosystem at once.
Olukokun, if you can add as well, where are we now in West Africa? Are we still in R&D, or we're now commercializing and scaling?
Yeah, basically, I think East Africa is doing so well in this, and with a number of companies that is stemming out of East Africa. West Africa is just warming up. We have quite a number of legacy automakers that try to do this. I know of Ghana, Kantaka, but with lead acid battery, I didn't think that project was a success. So majorly, the approach has always been to manufacture locally for West Africans. I don't know if importation is this year for East Africans, and that's why the model is you know, a little bit you know, on the hop for them. But here there is high cost in duty. Most governments are not looking at any rebate or subsidy for bringing in these vehicles, and Nigeria is very notorious in that. Though the NADDC, that's National Auto Development and Design Council, is trying their best, but it looks more like it's on paper rather than actions. They are working with universities, while I think they should be working with entrepreneurs, people that really want to bring this thing into the country rather than just research institutions alone. You know, we, in a way, entrepreneurs are doing a very good research. There is market research. They are getting results and they are working on it. So you should bring all these people to a round table to know how quickly you can bring e-mobility into the country, you know, rather than just select a few universities. So I think in West Africa, largely, we are still in R&D. And one of the ways to improve this would be that government should step up. They should come in, make the pathway clear for us and for any other players that really want to be. And if not, well, the local players may not be well grounded in manufacturing at the end of the day, and also adopt the East African style. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Ibrahim, if you can also fill us in North Africa, in Morocco.
Yes, in North Africa right now, 100% of the motorcycles are imported from China, from OEMs in China. And one of my personal objectives in E-Moto is to assemble at least one Moroccan model here in Morocco. But as Tolulope said, in Nigeria, there are no subsidies from right now from the government. that will encourage actors of the e-mobility to have or to set up their own assembly line or their own factory. So the R&D for 100% Moroccan motorcycle is does not exist. And the other thing is that I guess that when the market will reach a reasonable level of sales per year, I don't know, like 20,000 units per year, maybe there would be a reason to have our own assembly line and maybe our 100% motorcycle, Moroccan design motorcycle. And in Morocco, as you know, there is a huge automotive industry, as there are Renault that is producing here in Morocco for the African and the European market. And Renault came with all kind of how do we say in English? In French is sous-traitant, like Valeo, like Leoni, like some Japanese subcontractors for Renault. So there is a real automotive industry. Maybe this will encourage or will lead to have a two-wheeler assembly industry here in Morocco. This is my hope, but right now it's only importing, and the R&D is at zero.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I want to build on the points raised by the team here. Interesting points all around. One, so we're learning that depending on the market, we are moving now from R&D to commercialization. So we need to scale, and the market potential is there. In Morocco, 200,000 units per year. So even if we get 25% of that, that's 50,000 two-wheelers. In Kenya, there are about over 300,000 units imported every year. If we get 50,000 of that, that's a lot. So what are your views on working with people already in the automotive sector to help scale? Like, for example, the Solutions Africa in Mombasa, they are bringing in three-wheelers. They bring completely knockdown kits, and those kits are assembled by AVA. AVA already assemble buses, trucks, pickups, four-wheelers in Kenya. If you look at the automotive sector in Africa, for example, the leaders in terms of volumes or just general vehicle manufacturing, Morocco, I think they assemble around over 500,000 vehicles a year, sometimes close to 700,000, just like South Africa. But you have historically assembly plants around Africa, like for example in Zimbabwe, they used to push out 20,000 units per year, but right now I think they only make maybe 2,000 a year. So there is unused capacity in the traditional auto sector. So does it make sense now for players, startups in the two-wheelers to partner an AVA in Mombasa or an assembler already in Nigeria, who is struggling to assemble 20,000 Hyundais, but has that capacity to then work together, to assemble together, to scale? Is that an option? How should we look at it?
I think it's definitely an option because the investment required to build up your capacity, to build, warehousing, assembly line, it's a huge investment, and you don't want to make that investment until you know there's a market. The good thing with two-wheelers, especially electric, because there's less components, you can actually, it's easier to assemble, so you don't need as many tools or heavy production. But you do want to start formalizing that process, tap into that excess capacity, tapping into that knowledge, because it's not just the facilities you're tapping into, it's the skills that are already there, which means you don't have to train assembly staff. And then once you know there's a market, you can now transition into building your warehousing, assembly line, and really investing that heavy capital, because at that point you'll also have your own unique model, or built in Kenya, built in Morocco, built in South Africa model that you can now dedicate 100% of your capital and capacity.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Tom, what are your views on that?
It's an interesting question. I think so far, because because most folks, you know, you start off with a couple of bikes, you receive an investment, you move up to 20, 50, 100, and both 2- and 3-wheelers, when imported CKD, doesn't take too much time. Once you've got folks trained, you know, trained in-house, most people can get them, you know, half a man day of work, as the term goes, right? So it's not that much work, and I don't think it's currently necessary. The question will be in 3 years from now, when people are bringing in thousands at a time, whether it will then make more sense for them to partner with people like AVA. I feel like that's an open question, but for now, it doesn't seem necessary to me.
Okay. Olukokun, are there assembly plants in Nigeria? I think they make the Hyundai Kona electric one in Nigeria.
Yeah. I mean, Kona came around, it made a big noise. We've not heard too much about it anymore. Number one, the price point was not attractive to the common man, so we already know it wasn't going to do so well. So there's an assembly plant, or there are some in which the government is also encouraging, but nothing much has been done on that, on EVs and all. Then for electric motorcycle, I think the only one that is doing much on that is called Max Engine. And I think the model they're adopting is actually repurposing the ICE to electric. I don't know if they're currently ordering CKD or SKD from China, but the last I knew of them was they were converting ICE, I mean the normal motorcycle to electric, as well as that tricycle, the normal tricycle to electric. So as far as Nigeria is concerned, I think much more effort should be put in place, and the seriousness is not so much, and I know why. It's because of the oil thing, and I just don't know how else to go about it yet. But individually, everybody is pushing for electric mobility, and though starting a new assembly line could be very, very expensive, existing ones could, you know, be optimized for it, and we go that way. But nobody is seeing the need yet. The oil and gas is still selling, so that's one of the issues. Yeah.
Thank you, Olukokun. Ibrahim, as you know, Morocco is quite big in the auto industry. There is Stellantis there. They make lots of vehicles there. One of my favorite cars is actually made in Morocco, the Citroën Ami, the small car. I like it very much. It's got 7,000 pounds. I wish it's made in Morocco, but it's not sold anywhere in Africa. So my wish is that it's also made in Morocco for Europe, but I think it should be made in Morocco and also brought here. It's my favorite car, along with the Wuling Mini EV and the new BYD. I like small cars because they are affordable. So the infrastructure is already there in Morocco. In fact, even Morocco even makes semiconductor chips that go into Teslas. So the resources are there. So do you think it's as your volumes grow, eventually you guys can partner with the people who are already assembling the vehicles in Morocco to then ramp up the production of 2-wheelers?
Yeah, exactly. So for now, we are importing in CBU or SKD. SKD here in Morocco, for me, means the front tire and the handlebar that are disassembled. So we spend some minutes to assemble it, and it's quite easy. But for now, we don't import in CKD and completely knock down the product. But when the market will reach a certain level of units, then we will have some players on assembly line and on producing a 100% Moroccan motorcycle. Concerning the Ami vehicle, yes, it's produced here by Citroën and Peugeot here in Kenitra in Morocco. It's quite expensive for the Moroccan market. It's like $10,000 USD, and it's mainly exported in Europe. But so this is the first initiative of assembling electric vehicle here in Morocco, and I hope that in the coming years we'll have assembly lines for the 2-wheelers. once we reach a certain level, because the government encouraged this type of initiative by letting them have some fiscal helps, okay, for exporting, for example, in Africa and for the domestic market. But right now, we are still importing. As Thomas said, we import by 50, 100, 150 units, 1, 2, 3 containers at a time. When we will be able to import thousands and thousands of units, then we will have for sure assembly line and hopefully 100% designed Moroccan motorcycles.
Thank you. We have a question from Gad. He's asking another one on where the market is now. Where is the pricing now? Two-wheelers and three-wheelers. If you compare the electric three-wheelers and two-wheelers being produced now in Africa versus the current ICE vehicles available now, how is the price landscape looking like? Let's start with Ibrahim in Morocco.
Yes. So on the ICE motorcycle market, the cheapest one here in Morocco is 1,000 USD. Okay. And for the equivalent 50 cc. And the most expensive one is around 3,000 USD. For E-Moto, we noted that one of the main factor to encourage people to have electric motorcycles is the price. It is a very price sensitive market here in Morocco. So we try to be not that expensive and to compete a little with the ICE motorcycles. So in E-Moto, we have products starting at 1,200 USD, and it goes up to 2,200 USD. So we try to be among the prices that we have on the ICE motorcycle sector, but it is still perceived as an expensive product, and we try to communicate and to educate people on the saving that they can do with the electric motorcycle. Yes, you are going to buy a little bit more expensive than the ICE motorcycle, but you are going to save quite fastly in terms of consumption, in terms of maintenance, versus the ICE. So this is what we're trying to do here in Morocco.
Thank you. Chris, what is it looking like in East Africa?
So I think a lot of the players are a little, I'd say, so a typical, so I'll put it into what, 3-4 categories. So you start off with a normal ICE side. So you can split it into the Chinese bikes and into the Indian, and you can throw the Japanese bikes into that as well. And split into those two broad sectors. So typically the Chinese bikes will range between $1,000 to about $1,200. Maybe the nicer ones will go about 1,300. Then there's the Indian bikes, so your TVS, Bajaj, and then you throw in Honda and Yamaha, which will range from about $1,400 to about $1,600. And then the other category is now your second-hand bikes, about $400, maybe up to $600. And then there's the electric motorcycles. Where do we squeeze in? We're squeezing in at about the cheapest one, $1,500, going up all the way to about $1,200, $1,100. So right now, electric motorcycles are more expensive. The lower range ones are just about price competitive with the ICE ones. So what we found is a lot of people want to ride the Indian or the Honda or the Japanese bikes. They're more reliable, they're durable. So if you take that as a benchmark of where you want to be, then the cheapest electric bikes are maybe about 10 to 20% more expensive. This will come down with volume, and I think the price will also come down with specialization. So once companies start specializing in what they do, so the companies will focus purely on assembling and selling motorcycles. There's some that will focus on charging, some will focus on servicing, battery swapping. So if I say I focus purely on assembling motorcycles, I partner with someone who is doing battery swapping, I can then bring the price of my bike down to about $1,000 because I'm just selling the frame and the chassis and all the bike without the main fuel. And the person who's doing the swapping just have to, maybe charge someone $100 to get onto their swapping and charging network, and then they're ready to go. So for $1,100, you have an electric motorcycle. This is where I think the industry is going to go once people start specializing. The other thing that will bring the pricing down, at least here in East Africa, the government is looking at incentives on how to reduce pricing, not only on the CKD, on the knockdown kits for assemblers, but also incentives on pricing in batteries. So how can we zero rate or have some sort of tax exemption for electric batteries for EVs? Once that happens, you're going to see a lot more price parity coming into place, and then economies of scale also.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple of questions that come through. I'm going to try and remix and combine them. What needs to happen now for us to really go to mass production? By mass production, I mean like supplying a huge chunk of the yearly needs of the two-wheeler markets in each country. So one, what needs to happen? What do you think needs to be done? And two, what does that mean for models going forward? Battery swapping versus charging. Which ones, or is it both? How do each one play in terms of assisting or becoming a barrier to scaling? And there's another question that says, what is more efficient, converting the current fleet of ICE to electric, or just continuing to build electric from scratch? That's a three-part question. I hope you all got it. So I'll start with Tom.
Okay, let me see how much of it I can remember here. But so in thinking about how are we scaling? What does it take to move forward? I think financing is really, really important here. Financing is key. So the good thing is a lot of asset financiers have stepped in. Yeah, there's a really interesting consortium trying to come together in Kampala. That's why I'm here right now. And you have, folks like Mkopa, who's a large asset financier here, and they just tell everybody, listen, we will finance as many bikes as you can give us, right? And so that's wonderful. We have the support from that side. But now it's a question of, okay, but we need to get the bikes here first, and they need to be of strong enough quality. So supply is really the number one issue in my mind. And I think that's getting fixed, but it would help, certainly if a little bit more resources were dedicated to R&D to speed it up. Obviously, it's not something you want to rush, but it is something that you want to do very intensively. And that can help ensure that we've got quality products to scale up. And sorry, can you remind me the next portion of the question? Yeah,
so how do these models affect, promote, or become a barrier? Battery swapping or charging of motorbikes? How do you see? Because let's say you have to push out 2 million motorbikes in Africa per year, locally made.
Yeah.
Which one is more viable, or is there room for both, swapping or charging?
Yeah, so I think it mostly boils down to use case. So North Africa, South Africa, where you have a lot of personal scooters, or Francophone West Africa, those personal scooters, which are doing 30, 40 kilometers a day, charging is fine. People who own those typically have a little bit more money. They've got a little bit more income to spend on it. Charging will work just fine for them. But for the moto taxis, a battery case is much better. And there's a reason that, so many of the leading players and so many of the players that have got the financing and everything to scale up so far have moved towards battery swapping. And it's because it works best for the consumer. And at the end of the day, as much as people like to talk about disruption, the most effective disruption is the least disruptive one, which fits in with how people already operate. So to me, it boils down to use case.
Okay, thank you. Olukokun, what are your thoughts?
Hello, sorry, I had a very bad network, so I didn't get the question.
The question was, what needs to be done now to really scale now? Assuming we want to now make 2 million motorbikes per year in Africa, what needs to be done to get us there? And also, what is the role of swapping or charging in that ecosystem? Do we need both? Is one an enabler or one a barrier? Or would we need both?
Yeah, I think swapping will be very, very good because the rate at which we will need to deploy charging stations will not be as fast as we could, have swapping stations everywhere, So I think swapping will be very, very good to come with the scale we are looking at. And again, I understand in the climate tech, there are massive investment for e-mobility, maybe not e-mobility directly, but renewable energy. And then some investors are also looking into e-mobility. So for startups and others that are interested in mobility fast, I think there is a huge amount of money that could come to match the scaling we are looking at. Then the government also have to step up, create more enabling environment. So if we have people in the government that can help with lobbying, with the right policies, getting to 2 million would be in no time, I believe. Then I know AfricaNEV is working on standardization, which is very crucial to the scale we are looking at, so that interoperability will be easier. So I think it's possible when we put the right, peg in the right hole, yeah? And that's the way I think we can get to where we want to. Thanks.
I think hi, this is Josh from Ampersand. If I can also just maybe
hi, Josh, welcome.
add a couple of small points. Thanks. Yeah, so I've I think a couple of things. One is that I think, especially within the commercial 2- and 3-wheeler sector, I would argue that swapping is now very much orthodoxy. This is something that's been led by Gogoro. I think if you look towards India as well, that's swapping is kind of the norm rather than home charging. A lot of people think home charging is the norm, thinking about electric cars, but as far as 2-wheelers are concerned, I would argue it's the reverse. The other thing we found, we've done some home charging trials here in Kigali. We found that a lot of the drivers are, they don't have proper wiring at home. That's a big challenge. So we have to go in and spend money and time making sure the houses are properly earthed, that there's not, current running on the neutral phase. A lot of body drivers also park their motorbikes inside their homes at night for security and also just to keep it out of the weather and keep it clean. A lot of the time, the kids sleep in the living room, and a lot of the, we've seen across in India a lot of issues because of the use of NMC batteries in a lot of bikes, and NMC is just nickel manganese cobalt. It's more energy dense, which tends to mean it's more favored for use with home charging models where you're not removing the battery, because you can get more kilometers out of the same kind of weight and physical dimensions. It also costs less, but it's just much harder to build NMC batteries safely. We've seen some companies in the region like pull out from using NMC or just sort of give up entirely on building batteries for that reason. And so putting a big powerful battery pack, charging it, charging is the most dangerous time for any battery. Charging it inside someone's home at night is a challenge. So I think there's some important safety considerations there, because if we suddenly set someone's house on fire and kill some children, that's obviously just completely awful, and nobody would want that on their conscience. And B, it's also going to mean everyone's going to suffer because of massive regulation coming down the other way. They've seen that in India. They've spent probably a year and a half like adapting to that. It's definitely driven up costs as well in the meantime. And so that's a painful process that we just don't want to have to go through.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Josh, if you're just hanging, can I just ask you one more question? Thanks for joining.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So as one of the leading players in this industry, my question is, what do you think is the role of software in this industry? Let me give you I saw an interesting analogy the other day. 2 examples. One was saying that you find a very fancy phone from somewhere, it has 200 megapixel camera, something like that. But an iPhone would only have 12.5. But iPhone optimizes capabilities based on just having better software. And you hear these jokes a lot as well. Like, for example, you have a Mercedes-Benz, it's the most luxury, the most premium, but the software may not be as good as a very badly built Tesla. In terms of quality build is quite terrible. This is don't quote me. I'm saying what's out there. Yeah. So, but people then really emphasize the role of software in the ecosystem in terms of optimizing operations and also in terms of battery management. For example, getting the best out of what we have. For example, making sure safety-wise the batteries are operating in the right parameters, that we don't really have thermal runaway and fires and all those things. So in the African ecosystem, as you are seeing now, where are we now in terms of developing software, not just focusing on the hardware and things like that?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. Like, we could talk about software for quite a while here. And I promise I won't, but it touches on the product in so many ways. So like you say, optimizing the battery lifespan, also just the interaction and the user interface. Our very first bikes, it was very binary. Like when you pulled the throttle, it was either on or off. It was either 100% or 0. So there's a lot of work to improve user experience that refines that, especially incorporating regenerative braking, making that all work nice and smooth, not all shaky, getting the most out of the regen. And it's just one example. I think for us, the biggest value add, and we built our own software from the ground up, and is really around optimizing the battery swap network. So when we look at total capex needs over the next 10 years for the sector, we're looking at something like 80% of capital needs going into batteries for the models that are doing battery swapping. And so optimizing that across the network, making sure you don't have batteries that are sitting around doing nothing, but also making sure you're not charging your batteries faster than they need to be, kind of adopting a just-in-time approach. That we expect that will just from the efficient use of assets alone will reduce capital needs by about 25%. Let alone the increase in battery lifespan, which is definitely a thing, but much harder to measure, at least in the early days. And then also payments, making that whole experience seamless. I think additionally for the companies that are going down the route of the self-swapping cabinet, sort of using the Gogoro model, there's obviously you're competing with a human being at a petrol pump or at a human swap station. So your UX and your reliability has to be pretty outstanding. And especially it has to really produce significant savings overall. Because for example, we only 10% of our revenue that we earn from the swaps goes into staffing, and we pay more than the staff of the petrol stations, about $275 a month. I was just in India, got back yesterday, and average wages at petrol stations there range between $75 and $250 a month. So Taiwan, in contrast, average income is higher than in Japan. So you've definitely got to solve that problem. But out here, it's just really not that much of an issue. And even rental costs and so on aren't much of a saving. But whereas you're splitting the cost. But anyway, that's a whole other debate, is self-swapping versus other things. But again, the point is that you've got to generate really strong savings out of that, and so you have to have a pretty phenomenal software system. And my experience of using apps like Tier in Europe or Bird and so on is there's still always challenges where you have to call up the user center, and that's just going to be really frustrating for commercial drivers who are delivering pizzas or carrying a passenger in particular.
Thanks, Josh, for that. I think we are running out of time now, so I'd just like to invite the panelists one by one to give some closing remarks. And if you can just round up, and anybody else on the audience, if you have a closing question, feel free to fire away and type some questions in the chat box. So I'll start with Chris. Any closing remarks?
Yeah, I think it's been a pretty interesting discussion. I think that what the main point that's come out of this is that as an industry, we're still at the very early stages. We hope to be getting to the, if we can even just get 10% of the current market shares in our respective markets, we'll be doing pretty well. Right now, I think we're still under 1%. There's still a lot of learning to be done. There's still a lot of business models that need to be figured out. Figuring out even for the consumer education. I think as much as we think that we're doing a lot, I still think that the industry is still in a little bit of a bubble. There's still people who don't know that there are electric bikes out there. And when they do find out, they think that they're ridiculously priced because all they know about electric mobility is Tesla, which is a high-end luxury car. So, we're still at the very early stages. There's still a lot of work to be done. And I think what the industry needs right now is that awareness, not even just from for the players to go and educate the consumers. It's also pushing that awareness to government, to funders. Tom had said that a lot of the MFIs are looking to come in and finance the end user, but there's also a lot of capital that needs to come in and finance these companies if we're actually going to build a local, homegrown African based on that is transitioning.
Thanks, Chris. Olukokun, any closing remarks? Maybe Ibrahim, you can go first.
I'm okay with what Christopher said. We are at the very beginnings of this market. And if we try to reach in the next 5 years only 10% of the ICE motorcycles, 10% shares, it will be very, very good, and it would be a very good start for after, because as I said at the beginning, I strongly believe that the future will be electric at 100%. But we need also some helps from the governments, some subsidies in order to make this market more innovative and more interesting for the final customers. And depending on the market, we'll have both in parallel the swapping station solutions and the charging at home solution or at the office. It can go in parallel, and it won't be competing one on another, because for example, in Morocco, we have people that do 30-40 kilometers per day, so home charging is good. And we have also some people, professional, more particularly, that do 100-150 kilometers, and the swapping station will be a good solution for them. So this is why this is how I see the market here in North Africa, and especially for Morocco.
Yeah, thank you. We have David Mugambi who has a question. Please go ahead, David.
Yes, good afternoon. Hello, everyone.
Afternoon.
Yeah.
Yes, we hear you.
Mine is a comment. I am a consumer of the two-wheelers, a heavy consumer of the two-wheelers for the organization I work for. And the market, we are ready to move, but the products are the main challenge. We have the right products for the application we need these units for. I've been in a bucket in Kenya for the last 2 years, and my target is to onboard 100 EV motorbikes every year.
Sorry, David. Could you specify what is your use case? What do you use your current motorbikes for?
Currently, we are doing about 100-120 kilometers a day, mostly in every other terrain across the country, Kenya. And therefore, we need a motorbike which can basically replace, say, the DT 125, not on average. And that's what most government institutions within this country would wish to have. On Courtright, these people will go out in the morning and work throughout the day. They have no chances of retrofits. So initially, we went out to do a pilot with some product with the UNEP, and we were able to get a fairly robust bike, but without the required range. And we've been engaging the market for some time now to get the right range. And also, I would say earlier this last year, towards the end of last year, we tested a product which was able to do 80 kilometers on a single battery. And now it is being placed on 2 batteries. So we are hoping we should be able to get up to 140 kilometers on a single charge. And that should be enough for the kind of activities we take. I would also wish to point out that for most government institutions, we are dealing with internal combustion two-wheelers costing up to $5,000. So cost is not an issue here. It is more of the right product as opposed to the cost, as opposed to the public transport application, which most of the Chinese units are being applied for. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So, David, I just want to be, you need to specify what application are you using the bikes for?
Basically, we are a utility organization, reading meters, collecting revenue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so basically.
So you're using them to do your daily rounds?
To do daily rounds
Okay.
on every terrain. It's not just in town, mostly out of town.
And cost is not an issue?
Cost is not an issue when we talk about, we are already spending about 5,000 USD per single unit of the ICE units. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, any closing remarks?
Thanks, Remy. I mean, first of all, just thank you guys so much for hosting this interesting conversation. Really a lot of fascinating stuff happening in the sector. Like Ibrahim was pointing out, electric is the future. It's a question of how fast does this transition happen, right? What I would love to see is a very rapid phase out. And the good news is that it's very possible because most two-wheelers and three-wheelers have very short lifespans on the continent, right? The average motorcycle in Uganda or Kenya lasts 4 or 5 years. And so if you stop selling ICE bikes now, they will all be gone in 5 years from now, which is incredible. Or 95% will be gone, which is incredible, right? So to me, it's about scaling up in terms of financing, scaling up in terms of government support. There's a lot of great innovators and entrepreneurs pushing things out there. There's a lot of wonderful boater riders and so on who are taking the risk to try out these new technologies. Passengers are pushing for it. Everybody's pushing for it. And at the end of the day, it's a group exercise, right? And so getting everybody together, having these conversations, and then at the end of the day, supporting push for policy in all these places to make it happen, right? Reduce import duties, create a lower e-mobility tariff, so on and so forth. This is how we get it done. But that's it from my side. I'm happy to chat with anybody, always happy to talk about this really interesting segment. And thanks again for hosting this conversation.
Thank you very much. I'd like to hand over back to our host, Gad. Gad, please take it away, and thank you very much for hosting this and the entire NEV team.
We'd like to just, from the AfricaNEV team, we'd like to thank everyone for taking the time from their busy afternoons to come and, basically get knowledge from us and basically push e-mobility forward. To the panelists, thank you for giving us your time. It has been very, very informative. We will be having another webinar next month. That one will be mainly to deal with the public service sector for four-wheelers. I think someone from Basigo and a couple of other companies will be there. Thank you everyone for coming, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.